make sure you check out my website pcteach.me, where you can look at all the videos in particular category orders, also have the ability to contribute your own posts if you wish, and I hope to see you there. So with our data source view created, what we're going to do now is actually create our first cube, but what we're going to do is just going to revisit everything that we've talked about so far and then build on top of it. So this is where I'm going to sort of try and go through it hand in hand with you. So if you'd like to follow me from now on, please do. So we're going to first of all create a new project, and I'm going to call this my first cube. Not the most meaningful name in the world, but it'll do. So I've created a folder called First Cube. Select it, and then OK. And then data source view. I'm going to create a new one looking at my AdventureWorks. But to go through it again, I would click on New. I would then make sure I choose the native one, the native SQL Server. And then I'm going to just then click on the full stop and choose the DW 2008 database. Test that connection, OK. And then next, and I'm going to use the credentials of my current user, and then I'm just going to call it DS AdventureWorks DW 2008, and then I'm going to create a new data source view. Using the data source that I've got at the moment. And then once in here, I'm then going to just make this window a little bit bigger. I want you to add the following two values. I want you to add dim customer and then fact internet sales. And just add those two. Now with them done, just click on the dim customer on the right hand side and click on add related tables. And then click on the fact internet sales and click on add related tables. Now that will then bring up probably about 9-10 different DIMs and fact tables. They're the ones we're going to work on throughout the entire training session. So you can see there's a load of other things that are not in here. We may actually add the reseller and the reseller sales a little bit later on, but for the time being, no, we're not interested. So we'll just click on to next. And this is data source view, so DSV at the front, and then AdventureWorks DW, and then finish. There we are in here. Now I'm going to pause the video, but what I would like you to do now is what we've talked about on the previous videos. Create a named calculation on the customer table to allow us to see the full name, and also get rid of all of the prefixes of dim and fact and put some space bars on the table names. Not too interested in the actual field names because we'll be here all day, but just fundamentally, just at the top level, if we were looking at it, we're not going to see dim and fact, we're going to actually see the proper meaningful names. So go away and do that, and then we'll carry on when we're done. Pause the video, obviously. Okay, with that done, it should look a little bit more like this. Now, I will, wherever possible, over-embellish on certain attributes here. What we've got is I asked you to do the full name. I've got it here, but what I've done is I've actually embellished it a little bit further to also include the middle name. So just to show you the syntax of that, you'll notice it is standard SQL. So we've got case when is null, middle name is quote quote, equals quote quote, then it's just the first name and last name. So basically error capture, the word is error capture if the middle name is null, because if it's null and you actually concatenate it, the whole field will go null, because you can't concatenate null with text because it ultimately will become null. So what we've got is we've got the first name and last name if it is null, otherwise actually put in the middle name. Now you could have done it a different way. You could have just put in the is null middle name into that part there, but I'm just giving you variations of the theme just to show you can actually put conditions in, case statements, if statements and so forth, as well as just putting in standard functionality of SQL. Okay, so we've got that, so everything should now look hunky-dory. We're going to save that. We'll leave it open because we will be coming back to this. What we will now do is we can now go through the other options underneath. Now, your first instinctive area you're going to want to go to because of logical progression is data sources, data source views, therefore we must be going to cubes. Yes, we will on this video, however, ultimately I do not recommend it. The wizard approach is good to a certain degree for newbies, but if you're any sort of person worth their salt in this trade, you would not be using the wizard other than just getting a feel for the data for the first time round. After that, you should really be doing your dimensions first, then your cubes. But we'll go cubes. So what we'll do is we'll right click and do, hey, new cube. We'll click on that. We get a well done, you've clicked on the button wizard. We'll just click on next. And then in here it says, do you want to use existing tables, create an empty cube, or generate tables in the data source view? Now, the ones which are in here, like generate tables in data source, you'll notice it's got AdventureWorks Enterprise Edition and AdventureWorks Standard Edition. These are templates. No, don't use, ever. Create an empty cube. That you may want to do, but all that does is it just creates the empty shell. It doesn't do anything further than that. What we want to do is use existing tables. Now what that means is it's based on your data source view. So with that selected, let's click on to next. Notice DSV is my prefix, AdventureWorks, so it's referring to that. There we are, there's our particular measure groups. Now, it's asking us for measure groups. Right, what the heck is a measure group? Right, measures are basically values that you want to analyze, just like the word says. I want to measure it. So where is my actual numbered values? Well, they're the fact tables that we've now annoyingly removed the word fact from. But we know that internet sales is one of them. But hey, why don't we just let Microsoft scan the tables and find out for itself? Suggest. So off it goes. So what it's done is it's saying, well, I found internet sales, service response, and internet sales reason. Yes, all but internet sales reason, I would say. It's a bit tenuous, that one, but the first two bang on right. Now, why has it worked that out? Because it's looked at the tables and it's just gone to see which ones are predominantly numeric in structure rather than having text, and these are the ones that it's come back with. Now, what I'm interested in though is I don't want the internet sales reason and I don't want the survey response. All I want is internet sales selected. So that's my measure group. That's all my measures I want. All my values, my total sales, etc. like that, are all located in here. So with that ticked, I'm just going to click on to next. And then what it's done is it's gone into the table and says, right, okay, well, here are all the numerical values that I can find. So we've got things like revision number. Well, I don't want to really add revision numbers together. I probably will be interested in adding the order quantities, the unit price, maybe the extended amount. Do I want to add the percentages together? That one is a bit of a tenuous one, which we'll come to much later on through the course, because you don't normally want to add percentages, but it is still a measure that you are going to want to look at, which we'll come to later on. So I'm just going to leave them all switched on because you can always get rid of them later on. But the default measure is always going to be an additive measure. Additive is an important word to remember. Additive is to be summation. So summing, basically. So if I click on next, it then says, well, what I've done is by looking at the data source view, if I move that over to the side here, we've got our fact internet sales, which is just up here. But I've noticed we've got a date table. We've got a survey response, we've got all these different things which could potentially be all related together. Well, you're absolutely right, they are. But do I want them all? Well, at the moment, no. I'm going to turn off sales territory. I'm going to turn off promotion. And internet sales. Hang on, isn't internet sales, if we go back, isn't internet sales our measures? So why on earth would we have the facts table, which I've been alluding to already in the past as being like the one-to-many, the dimension is the one, and the fact table is the many. Why on earth would we actually be having internet sales appearing? Now that goes back to one of the previous videos, and what I'll do is I'll just bring this up in SQL Server so I don't have to change everything around. If we look at the fact internet sales table, you may recall from that video I was talking about them being all numbers apart from the last two, because you could very well likely want to look at the PO number or the customer, the carrier tracking number, i.e. who sent it out and so forth. So in its own right, it can actually be a dimension as well. Now this is one of the fundamental key differences between this and earlier other software which is out there, because not many cube structures allow both a dimension and a fact table to be the same thing. Quite often what you ended up having to do is have to duplicate the information. So one would become fact internet sales, and then you'd have to do it again and call it dim internet sales. Now in analysis services 2005-2008 onwards, you don't have to do that, which is fantastic. Now at the moment it is not applicable, but we will come to that much later on. So I'm going to untick that. So ultimately we should have customer, date and currency. In actual fact, I'm going to even turn off currency. I'm not interested in that. So we've got date and customer. Now notice though on the customer one it's saying, well, we've got the customer, and there's the customer table. Incidentally, that's the name that's going to be given, and can you see, because I clicked on it twice, I can rename it. That's the actual table behind the scenes, or what we've called customer here in the data source view, which is behind the dialog box. But notice it's also saying, but I've also noticed that geography is related to it, because one customer one geography could have many customers. So it's actually working out, do you want me to sort of flatten out these dimensions even further? So we've got the geography information inside the customer table. Well, I'm going to leave that ticked just so we can see the differences between the date and the customer table. We click on next, and it now asks me, what do we want to call the cube? Well, I'm going to call this cube my first cube. And then with that done, I'm going to click on finish, and then give it a second, and then all being well, we are now in a new structure, a new tab called My First Cube, and as you can see over here, My First Cube. Also notice that it's actually created the dimensions of date, customer and product, the ones that we had selected earlier on. And also notice, can you see that we've got sort of like a genericized data source view in our cube structure. Now we've got some colour, which is quite thankful considering how grey tone and monotonous it is here. However, what we've got is we've actually got a bright coloured one indicating it's our fact table, the others indicating they are dimensions of some shape or form. So there's our particular cube. Now, is it ready to work? Well, kind of. It is now been set up to work with these particular dimensions, but by no means is it ready to be used. What we've got is things called processing to do. So at the moment all of this has been done on your development machine. What we do need to do now is actually process it, and what that means is I want to aggregate my data together. So when I click on a geography or a city of, say, London, it immediately sums all my information to the London level. If I choose a customer, it gives me a total of all the sales that customer's done, and for that, that's not done on the fly. This requires it to be processed, and because this is also the first time we've done it, we also need to look at how analysis services is set up. So what I'm going to do is, before we move any further in bids, I'm going to just jump back into SQL Server. I'm going to collapse everything, and I strongly recommend you do the same. And what we're going to do is we're going to connect, but not to the database engine, this time the analysis services engine. Now it'll ask us for the name of the server. Mine's called Media Server, so I'll just connect to that one. And it should then come up like this, so Media Server Analysis Services. Great. Databases, nothing. Assemblies, assemblies. Now, if you're familiar with any kind of coding, an assembly is like a library of commands, so you can actually add additional assemblies. So you may have some very clever code that you've created which specifically deals with number of widgets times number of Ujima flips and so forth, and it puts them all together as one wonderful calculation which can be very, very complicated. You can make it an assembly and add it to the cube, and then you can then reference it via scripting. We're not going to be covering that on the course because that's real heavy duty stuff. We're nowhere near ready for that sort of level, and dare I say, I'm not ready for that level either. So I'm going to just collapse the assemblies, and databases, it's blank. So if we're going to do analysis services, we've got to really have a database, and so we're at the point back in bids of having our cube created on the development machine, but it's not processed, it's not ready to go. What we need to do now is tell it to process, and for this we need to now go up to this icon, second one in, and click on the process icon. Now it's gone immediately onto our server, and it's saying, well, hang on, it appears to be out of date. Would you like to build and deploy the first project? So there's two key words to understand here: build and deploy. Build is to syntactically check it and make sure it is correct, ready for population of data. And deploy is the processing of said data into the built structure. So because it is brand new, we've got neither. So let's say yes, and away it goes. And depending again on the grunt of your machine, this next step may take a little while. So over on here you'll get this little screen, and just watch it as it goes through its steps. Well, in this case mine's done already. It says deployment is done. So what that's done is it's technically done the build, but it's now not actually put it anywhere yet. It's now ready to process. So it's built the cube, but can you now see this dialog box with process cube? So with process cube selected, I'm going to click on to run. And away it will go. Now immediately I've got a problem. Oh dear, what's happened here? Well, I know exactly what's happened here. The reason being is because I've not specified where this data is going to end up. Where is this cube ultimately going to be? And at this point it's basically saying it contains an impersonation mode that is not supported for processing of this operation. So okay, let me close that, and let me close that again, because we've obviously got to have to amend this. So this is a security issue. So the reason for this is because the impersonation mode that we've got it on is not going to work. So in data sources, I mean, this also is a good thing because it actually shows you changing one thing here will then trickle through all the other steps. So if we just double click on the data sources view and then the impersonation method, either set it to the service account, or if you know the name of the account, in my case it's admin, and then OK it. What you should find now is, if I just test that connection and just make sure I can get across OK, so that's fine. Now if you try and build it, you should be OK. So there we go, it seems to be running through OK now, so it's just building everything. So it's processing the dimensions, populating the data into the structure, and it's also populating the cube and its structure and so forth. Once it says process is succeeded, we click on close and close again. So just to recap, the reason why it didn't work was because the deployment did not appreciate the use credentials of current user. What you need to do is you need to specify a Windows username and password. Now, why is that? It's been working for us up till now, but why not on the cube? The reason is that when you actually deploy it, you would then be setting this up potentially for live, and so you can't rely on the fact that you would use the credentials of the current user. I'm logged in. Is the analysis server going to be logged in? Chances are the answer is no. So what you'll probably end up doing is just setting it onto a specific user that you would know will work on both sides of the fence, an admin account. You can use service, but it's not a good idea if you're talking about a domain-based solution. So you're better off getting a proper Windows account. So this could be a service account that's been set up by your domain admins. So with that done and deployed, let's have a look at it. Well, what we can do is just staying where we are, we can now go to the browser, and all being well, the browser should then pick up our measures. So we expand our measures, and then just let's drag sales amount in, and then let's have a look at customer. Oh, where's the customer name? Where's, oh dear, well, let's have a look at due date. Oh, the keys. Oh, where is everything? Welcome to the wizard. What the wizard does is it creates the basic structure, but it just then fails to deliver anything. Now, there's a logic to this, and it'll become clearer on the next video when we talk about dimensions. But fundamentally, we're now at a point that we can actually, if I just put the cus geography key in, you can now see that we're getting aggregations, and I could then say, well, I'm interested in that over a particular product key. So really we want the product names, but you can see now, based on geography area 2 and product number 214, we can see a value. So it's working. That's the main thing. We have now got a fully fleshed out cube. Final thing before we finish this particular chapter off is if I go into Management Studio now, hit the refresh button whilst I'm in Analysis Services, we should now see that we've now got my first cube there, and there's our cube information, our measure groups, etc., etc. All the information that we've seen before. Don't worry about partitions, right pack, aggregate designs. We'll be getting into that much later on. But fundamentally, we've now got all of our particular set structures, and our dimensions are here. But bear in mind, I go into properties. Do I get an editor? No. All I get is things about caching it and error configurations. How do I can actually control what fields go in what? Well, that's where it's all done in bids. So this sort of is a very good divider between what the developer does and what the database administrator does. This, what we're looking at right here, is DBA territory. What we'll be looking at in bids is the developer territory, which is the more fun bit, I'm afraid to say, you DBA users out there. Alright, well, that's that video done. Next video, we're going to start really going into dimensions and understanding how they are actually created and what benefit does it give us. Okay, so thanks for watching.